If I had to give a Facebook status update to your relationship with Tony Leon during these years, it would be, it's complicated. You praised Tony for not taking up a minister's position in Madiba's first cabinet, but loathed his dealings with the new National Party in the beginning years of the DA, to a point where you formed your own project Fight Back to get Tony out of the party. For example, you write, and I quote, "For my part, I began to regard Tony and the coterie of young men in his office as a nest of narcissism, impenetrable to other perspectives and intoxicated on their own importance. Anyone who didn't agree with them was an idiot, a goody two-shoes or an adversary, depending on the issue. I had no direct line to Tony. I gave up trying to work through David Mania, his chief of staff, who approached everything as if it were a military maneuver and tended to impute motives and agendas where they did not exist, to the point that one had to develop a motive and an agenda as well as a strategy to get anything across to the leader. Increasingly, I just kept my distance. I only understood their office culture many years later when on an international flight, I watched a few episodes of The West Wing, the television drama series depicting the cutthroat politics of the American president's office. It suddenly dawned on me. Tony's office had been modelled on the West House West Wing, and each of the bright young politicos that surrounded him was playing a role in the series as if they were vying for an Emmy. Do you agree with my assessment of your relationship status?"
Yeah, my relationship with Tony was very complex. There's no question about that. I didn't like the Fight Back campaign at all. And he was right about the Fight Back campaign for reasons that I go into in the book. And I supported him in realigning the politics when he brought in the NNP, because I felt very strongly that it would change the dynamic in the Western Cape government, which was impossible under Neil Barnard and Gerald Morkel. So I did it for that reason, and you can read all about that if you're interested. But when the New National Party tried a reverse takeover, which they did, and it really mattered because our value set was at stake. They had never abandoned the default to racial nationalism, never. And our very core value set was at stake. And when Martinus van Schalkwyk left the party, Tony was really spooked. He was really spooked by that development. And he didn't want the remaining National Party members in the DA to walk out again. And they understood at that point that they had a lever on Tony, which they used all the time. And if they didn't get their way, they would say, "We're going to leave." And of course, we had the floor crossing in those days, which made it very easy for them to leave. And Tony was terrified that his entire legacy would go down the drain when this great gamble that he had taken exploded for a second time, and the great risk that we would go back to the 1.7% we had been in 1994. So he had to keep the party together. And I had a great sense of empathy with that. You do have to keep the party together when you're the leader. And I had to try and keep the party together when I was the leader. So I had a great deal of empathy with that. But I was not prepared to accept the trade-off with our values. And so eventually I decided that even if we had to cross the floor, in the floor crossing to restart the Democratic Party, I was going to do that. But of course, we had a discussion about that in my own group, and we decided very quickly not to do that. We thought it was the wrong thing to do, but we thought it was much better then to fight back inside the party and retake hold of the party, which is then what we did, despite the fact that we were a tiny minority in the Western Cape. We were outnumbered 2-1, and we had to fight back with every strategic strategy. It was every strategic intervention that we could.